Remember, our planet is called the blue planet. That's because it is covered about 3/4 or 71% water. And that water can slosh around, kind of like the water in my cup. And that water can slosh around as gravity pulls on it. So what happens, creating the tides, is that the moon pulls on Earth and that water can slosh towards that, get a greater pull, and create a high tide. And as Earth rotates or spins, we can have places that are pulling in line with the moon getting high tide, or off at a right angle and getting low tide. So what happens is if I pick one spot, like right here next to this green continent, here it would be in line high tide. As it spins over here at a right angle away, it would be low tide. When it comes on the opposite side in line with that moon, because of inertial rotation, it would also have another high tide. Over here another low tide, and then back in line it would have high tide. So what we see is a cyclic relationship every 6 hours approximately between high tide and low tide. Those are the tides. Now you might wonder, okay, what about the sun? How come, the sun is pulling on Earth with gravity? How come the sun doesn't cause the tides, but the moon does? What do you think is the reason for that? Even though this diagram is not drawn to scale, okay, the sun is a lot larger. You would think, wow, the sun should be pulling, should cause the tides. No. What's the reason? The distance. The moon is a lot closer, the sun is actually a lot further away. Too far away to create the tides. One more thing to note about the tides. The greatest tides are what we call the spring tides. That's when the moon is pulling in line with the sun. Even though it's far away, it gets a little bit of extra nudge from the sun, and it can create a little bit larger tide, spring tide. This is during the new moon phase, or technically, along with inertia, when the moon is on this side, in line, right? Full moon, we can get spring tides. Might want to make that sketch. All in a line. Full moon or new moon to create the spring tides. The smallest of the tides are the neap tides, and that's when the moon is pulling, all right, at a right angle to the sun. So it can't get that little boost from the sun. That occurs either in the first quarter or in the third quarter. So now when the moon is kind of pulling at a right angle, either pulling that way or pulling back here from the sun. Neap tides are the smallest. Eclipses are shadows on the Earth caused by the positions of the sun and the moon. Whether the moon is on this side of Earth or it is revolved and it is over located on this side between, either way can create a type of eclipse. There's two major types we'll talk about. When eclipses occur, there are two different types of shadows. Right? So an eclipse is a shadow on the Earth. There are two different types of shadows. Best way to show this is with my hand, make a shadow on the wall. When I put my hand up there, if you look at the shadow, you're going to see that there's a really dark part of the shadow in the center. That is called the umbra, the darkest part of the shadow. And then off on the side here in the margins, there is like a partial shadow. That partial shadow is called the penumbra. So the umbra is the darkest, and the penumbra, P, partial darkness, P. Both of those are involved in creating eclipses, the umbra and the penumbra. So the first type of eclipse we're going to talk about is a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse occurs when the Earth is in the middle, blocking the sunlight from reaching the moon. There's your definition. You might need to sketch in the margins of your notes a diagram of this. Sun, Earth in the middle, moon on the end. Lunar eclipse. The sunlight is trying to get past Earth so that it can shine on the full moon. Earth blocks it. So a lunar eclipse occurs during the full moon at nighttime when the moon is on this side away from the sun. You can only see a lunar eclipse at nighttime. The moon has to be just in the right spot. Now there's another thing about a lunar eclipse. We already know that as the moon revolves around the Earth, so I'm trying to keep the lit portion always facing the sun, right? Half of the moon is lit up. That lit portion is always facing the sun. As it revolves around the Earth, it does not go in a flat orbit. It's actually tilted at about a 5-degree angle. So what that means is sometimes the moon ends up here. So the sunlight can get over the top of Earth and hit the moon, full moon. Sometimes the moon is a little bit lower. The sunlight can get around the bottom portion of the Earth, shine on the moon, full moon. So we do not get a lunar eclipse every single month as the moon comes back around. They are rare. But when the moon is positioned just in the sweet spot of the shadow of the Earth, right, and the Earth blocks that sunlight, lunar eclipse. Now, when the moon is on this side, now we've got a different diagram to draw. The moon is in the middle. It is now blocking our view of Earth looking at the sun. That is a solar eclipse. It occurs during the daytime when we're trying to see the sun. And next what I want to do is I'm going to show you a video, right, of an actual solar eclipse of us looking at the new moon during the day, blocking our view of the sun.
A solar eclipse occurs when the moon blocks the sunlight from reaching us here on Earth. Solar eclipses occur during the daytime, right, when the sun is out, and when the moon is in the new moon phase. And as you learned, the new moon phase is when the moon is in between the Earth and the sun. So you're trying to look at the moon and you can't see it because the dark face of the side of the moon is facing us and the sun is out. That's the new moon phase. So right now, here's a solar eclipse where if I get the filter just right, you can see that about half of the sun is being blocked in the little orange dot. That's what we call a partial solar eclipse. We have a partial solar eclipse going on right here because we are experiencing the penumbra shadow of the moon. If we were in the darkest part of the moon's shadow, lined up just perfectly with the umbra, we would have a total solar eclipse, where everything would be completely dark when the moon is completely blocking the sun. That is a total eclipse experiencing the umbra part of the shadow. And sometimes when the moon is just a little too far away from Earth and the umbra doesn't quite reach all of Earth to create a total eclipse, that's when we get what is called an annular eclipse. And you'd be able to see the dark new moon phase with a ring of fire of the sun around it. That is called an annular eclipse, and the distance of the moon with the Earth has to be just perfect.